Today we're going to preview and predict two old Big 12 rivals, Nebraska at Oklahoma. I'm going to predict the game and the seasons of these two bitter rivals. Let's go. Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's me again, Golden Blue Dude. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. I do college football videos every single day. Don't forget to check out my friends at Tri-State Wood Sketch. All you have to do is send him a picture, and he'll turn it into a beautiful piece of art on wood. Check out his website at www.tristatewoodssketch.com. Tell him Golden Blue Dude sent you, and you'll get 20% off. Today is Father's Day, so I want to wish all those fathers out there happy Father's Day. In fact, I'm wearing my Father's Day present for my wife. I think it's awesome. She has good taste. Oklahoma is still in the Big 12, and Nebraska used to be in the Big 12, so I wore a special shirt for both of y'all because I know we can agree on one thing, and that is horns down. First up, we're going to talk about Nebraska. Scott Frost has had a rough time so far at Nebraska. So far, he's only 12-20. That's pretty bad. Last year, they finished 3-5, fifth in the Big Ten West. Nebraska's preseason ranking is 48. It's actually not that bad. Let's take a look at their offense real quick. Last year, they averaged 23.1 points per game. That's 102nd in the nation. That's Nebraska's big problem. No offense. They averaged 391.5 yards a game. They do have a couple of key losses, including leading wide receiver Dale Robinson. He transferred, and even though he didn't have a lot of production, they lost co-captain wide receiver Cade Warner. Fair warning, some of these names for both Nebraska and Oklahoma are tricky. I probably will mispronounce some names. Let's start with the offensive line. 4 starters on the offensive line are back. That started in that final game against Rutgers. I don't know if they started the entire season, but I do know they started that final game against Rutgers, so they have that continuity going. One thing for sure about Nebraska this year is on offense, they have size. A lot of it. Starting with their quarterback, Adrian Martinez. Last year, he was 108 for 151, 71.5%, threw for 1,055 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. He's a dual-threat quarterback. 91 carries for 521 yards, 5.7 yards a carry, and 7 touchdowns. Nebraska likes to run the ball, and they will do that again this year, and probably successfully. Here's their running backs. Starting with running back Marquise Stepp. He's the transfer from USC. Did suffer a spring injury, though, so I don't know how healthy he'll be in 2021. Last year, he had 45 carries for 165 yards at 3.7 yards a carry and 3 touchdowns. Running back Marvin Scott III, 24 carries for 62 yards, 2.6 yards a carry. Now let's look at that passing game. The wide receivers and tight ends. You guys need to step up this year. Starting with tight end Austin Allen. Last year he had 18 receptions for 236 yards and 1 touchdown, so actually a decent tight end. They do get the Montana transfer, wide receiver Samori Toure. 87 receptions for 1,495 yards and 13 touchdowns. That was in 2019. So that could be a big boost to the Nebraska passing game. They also have incoming 4-star recruit wide receiver Omar Manning. He's 6'4", 225 pounds. Like I said previously, size. Then there's wide receiver Oliver Martin, 5 receptions for 63 yards. Wide receiver Levi Falk, 13 receptions for 122 yards, 1 touchdown. Wide receiver Alante Brown, 3 receptions for 41 yards. And wide receiver Xavier Betts, 12 receptions for 131 yards and 1 touchdown. Honestly, depth is not an issue on the offense, but somebody has to step up and be a playmaker in that wide receiving core. Now let's look at Nebraska's defense. They do have a key injury, and that's linebacker Will Honus. Last year, Nebraska's defense allowed 29.4 points per game. That's 64th. Not great, but not as bad as their offense, and allowed 386.5 yards a game. This year, Nebraska must pressure the quarterback more effectively. They were 98th in sacks last year. Not very good. Here's their front 7, starting with the defensive line. Defensive end Ben Steele, 27 tackles, 13 by himself, 1.5 sacks. Defensive end Casey Rogers, 25 tackles, 9 by himself, 1 sack, 2 pass deflections. Defensive end Ty Robinson, 17 tackles, 5 by himself. Defensive end DeAndre Thomas, 19 tackles, 8 by himself, 1 pass deflection. Defensive tackle Damian Daniels, 19 tackles, 10 by himself. And defensive tackle Jordan Riley, he had 1 solo tackle. I do think Nebraska has a pretty good linebacking core, starting with linebacker Garrett Nelson, 30 tackles, 16 by himself, 1.5 sacks. Linebacker Luke Reimer, 40 tackles, 29 by himself, 2 sacks, and 1 forced fumble. Linebacker Nick Henrich, 27 tackles, 8 by by himself, and linebacker JoJo Doman, 58 tackles, 35 by himself, 2 forced fumbles, and 5 pass deflections. I don't think Nebraska's secondary was terrible last year, but they do need to force more turnovers. That's the key issue. And stop missing tackles. Starting with their cornerbacks. Starting with cornerback Cam Taylor-Britt, 28 tackles, 23 by himself, 2 interceptions, and 4 pass deflections. Cornerback Quentin Newsome, 11 tackles, 9 by himself, 1 forced fumble. Safety Deontay Williams, 51 tackles, 37 by himself, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble, and 4 pass deflections. And safety Marquel Dismuke, 47 tackles, 29 by himself, and 3 pass deflections. I do think Nebraska will be better, but that's not saying much. The question is how much better. Can Nebraska get to a bowl, and if they do, will it be enough to save Scott Frost's job? Here's a look at the 2021 Nebraska football schedule. They start off the season at Illinois. That game might be pretty tough, but I think Nebraska will actually win that game. And they get Fordham at home, win. Buffalo at home, win. At Oklahoma, I'll predict that game here in a little while. At Michigan State's going to be terrible, a train wreck. That's a win for Nebraska. Northwestern at home. Northwestern's going to take a big step backwards, win. They do get Michigan at home, but I think that's a loss. I think Michigan's just a little more talented than Nebraska. At Minnesota, loss. Minnesota will be much improved this year. They get their bye week. A home game against Purdue, win. A home game against Ohio State, that's a loss. And they get their second bye week. I didn't know Nebraska had 2 bye weeks. That's a little weird. Then at Wisconsin, loss. And then they get Iowa at home. That's a loss. So depending on that Oklahoma prediction, I have Nebraska going either 6-6 or 7-5. That's right. I have Nebraska barely getting to a bowl. The downside to that is I do think Nebraska loses 5 of their last 6 games. Yikes. Not the way you want to end a season. Now let's look at Oklahoma. Last year they were 9-2, first in the Big 12. They got off to a slow start, but after that they just continued to build momentum, and I think that carries into the 2021 football season. Oklahoma has a top 5 ranking in the preseason polls, so they're going to be solid this year. Let's talk about Oklahoma's offense. Good luck trying to stop that offense, whoever plays Oklahoma this year, including my team, West Virginia. 3 of their offensive linemen are back, but I'm not worried about that. They've always had excellent depth at the offensive line. Oklahoma is freaking loaded. Spencer Rattler is super focused this year. He's put on some weight. He's going to be a little bit tougher. After getting off to a slow start last year, Spencer Rattler caught fire. Let's take a look at Spencer Rattler. Last year, he was 214 for 317. That's 67.5%, threw for 3,031 yards, 28 touchdowns, and just 7 interceptions. Dual threat quarterback, but didn't do much of that last year. 81 carries for 160 yards, only 2 yards a carry, but also 6 touchdowns. Oklahoma's going to have a pretty good running game, starting with running back Kennedy Brooks. He's back. He had 155 carries for 1,011 yards, 6.5 yards a carry, and 6 touchdowns. That was in 2019. They also get the Tennessee transfer, Eric Gray. Last year, he had 157 carries for 772 yards, 4.9 yards a carry, and 4 touchdowns. As good as Oklahoma's run game will be, I think their passing game will be even better, starting with their tight ends. Tight end Austin Stogner, 26 receptions for 442 yards and 3 touchdowns. Tight end Jeremiah Hall, 18 receptions for 218 yards and 5 touchdowns. Wide receiver Theo Weiss, 37 receptions for 530 yards and 4 touchdowns. Wide receiver Jaden Hasselwood, 4 receptions for 65 yards. Then the wide receiver that I'll really be looking at, wide receiver Marvin Mims, 37 receptions, 610 yards, and 9 touchdowns. He's going to be one of the best wide receivers in the nation this year. They also have wide receiver Mario Williams, an incoming 4-star freshman. He's 5'11", 178 pounds. He's already impressing the coaches. Wide receiver Drake Stoops, 15 receptions for 219 yards and 2 touchdowns. And wide receiver Brian Darby, 1 reception for 14 yards. So that wide receiving core has talent, they have depth, and they have experience. Look for Oklahoma to score in bunches this year and possibly break some NCAA records. Yeah, that's how good it's going to be. Now let's look at Oklahoma's defense. Gone are the days of Oklahoma having a Big 12 defense because of defensive coordinator Alex Grinch. He has made a tremendous difference at Oklahoma. Oklahoma has tremendous depth on the defense, starting with their defensive line. Defensive lineman Isaiah Coe, he's a JUCO transfer. He's a 3-star prospect, 6'3", 305 pounds. Defensive tackle Perion Winfrey, 17 tackles, 9 by himself, a half a sack, and 3 pass deflections. And defensive tackle Isaiah Thomas, 31 tackles, 20 by himself, 8 sacks, 1 forced fumble, and 2 pass deflections. Oklahoma will have arguably the best linebacking core in the Big 12 and top 10 in the nation, starting with linebacker Deshaun White, 34 tackles, 21 by himself, 2.5 sacks, and 2 pass deflections. Linebacker Brian Asamoah, 66 tackles, 39 by himself, 2 sacks, 1 interception, 4 pass deflections, and 1 forced fumble. Linebacker Nick Bonito, 32 tackles, 19 by himself, 8.5 sacks, wow, and 2 pass deflections. And nickelback Jeremiah Cradell, 13 tackles, 6 by himself. The secondary is still a work in progress, but the competition there is solid, therefore the secondary itself should be solid in 2021. Here's an educated guess of who I think should start chart. According to Oklahoma's defensive depth chart, cornerback Jaden Davis, 11 tackles, 10 by himself, 5 pass deflections. Cornerback Woody Washington, 44 tackles, 33 by himself, 2 interceptions, and 4 pass deflections. Strong safety DeLauren Turner-Yell, 50 tackles, 33 by himself, a half a sack, 1 interception, and 1 pass deflection. Free safety Pat Fields, 44 tackles, 28 by himself, 1 interception, and 4 pass deflections. Of course, Oklahoma's defense is not going to be as good as their offense, but it won't be a liability. I think this will be a top 25 defense in 2021. As far as Oklahoma's schedule goes, for me, the big question is, can they beat an elite Iowa State twice? And if they can, and they go 1-1 against the Cyclones, will that be enough to get into the playoffs? Here's a look at their schedule in 2021. They start off the season with a weird road trip to Tulane. Win. Western Carolina at home. Win. Nebraska at home. I'll predict that here in just a second. West Virginia at home. Win. At Kansas State. Tricky because Kansas State has had Oklahoma's number the past few years, but I think Oklahoma has this game circled. Win. Then the rivalry game against Texas in Dallas. Win. TCU at home. Win. At Kansas. Win. Texas Tech at home. Win. They get their bye week. At Baylor. That's a win. After that, the big game, Iowa State at home. I think they get the win in Norman. Then they finish off the season at Oklahoma State. Win. So depending on this Nebraska prediction, I have Oklahoma going either 12-0 or 11-1. Now for the prediction for the actual game between Nebraska at Oklahoma. I wish I had better news for Nebraska fans, but I don't see them having a chance to beat Oklahoma. This could get ugly real quick, but Nebraska might be able to keep it close in the first quarter. I've seen stranger things happen, but ultimately, Oklahoma's depth, skill, and experience will wear Nebraska out, and they will be going for style points in this game. Plus, it's a rivalry. I have Oklahoma big over Nebraska, 52-17. It's going to be a blowout. That means I have Oklahoma going 12-0 in the regular season. I have them playing Iowa State in the Big 12 championship. The question is, can they beat them twice? And then for Nebraska, I have them going 6-6, getting to a bowl, barely, losing 5 of their last 6. Not a great way to end the season, but it is enough to get to a bowl. Is it enough to save Scott Frost from being fired? I guess we'll see. That's all I got for you for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.